The morning sun cast long shadows across the ruins of what was once downtown Seattle. Captain James Miller surveyed the destruction from his makeshift command post, his faithful German shepherd, Max, sitting alert by his side. It had been 3 years since the alien invasion began, and humanity was still fighting back with everything they had. James adjusted his worn combat vest and checked his ammunition count, a habit he'd developed during the countless skirmishes with the invaders. The aliens, with their advanced technology and ruthless tactics, had decimated most major cities across Earth. Yet somehow, pockets of human resistance remained strong, proving more resilient than their enemies had anticipated. Max's ears suddenly perked up, and he let out a low growl. James had learned to trust his dog's instincts. They'd saved his life more times than he could count. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, gripping his rifle tighter. Max's nose twitched, and he began moving purposefully through the rubble, leading James away from their usual patrol route. The dog stopped at what appeared to be a collapsed office building, sniffing intently at a gap between 2 concrete slabs. Then, instead of growling as he usually did when detecting aliens, Max whined, a sound James hadn't heard since they'd found that injured human survivor last month. Cautiously approaching, James peered through the gap, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. What he saw made him instinctively raise his rifle. An alien, one of the scout class, was trapped under a fallen beam. Its iridescent armor was cracked, and dark blue fluid, their equivalent of blood, pooled beneath it. The alien's 4 eyes focused on James, but instead of reaching for its weapon, it remained still, making a sound that seemed almost resigned. James had never seen one of them this vulnerable before. They usually fought to the death or activated their self-destruct mechanisms when cornered. To his surprise, Max wasn't displaying his usual aggression toward the aliens. Instead, the dog carefully approached the injured creature, sniffing it curiously. The alien slowly extended one of its upper limbs, not in threat but in a gesture that reminded James of someone trying to pet a dog. James stood there, finger on the trigger, faced with a decision that would challenge everything he knew about this war. The military protocol was clear: all aliens were to be eliminated on sight. They had shown no mercy to humans, destroying cities and killing millions. But something about this situation felt different. Max looked back at his owner, tail wagging slightly, then turned back to the alien. In all their years together, through military service and the invasion, James had never known his dog's judgment to be wrong about people, or apparently, about aliens. The injured alien made no aggressive moves, even though it still had access to its sidearm. Instead, it watched Max with what James could swear was curiosity in its 4 eyes. The creature's breathing was labored, and James knew it wouldn't survive long without help. As he stood there, memories of the war's atrocities flashed through his mind: the burning cities, the lost friends, the countless civilian casualties. But he also remembered why he joined the military in the first place: to protect and serve, to be better than those who chose cruelty. James lowered his rifle slightly, his mind racing. He knew this decision could cost him everything, but something told him this moment was more important than he could understand. As Max gently nuzzled the alien's outstretched hand, James realized he was about to do something that would either prove to be the biggest mistake of his life or possibly change the course of this war entirely. James Miller took a deep breath and made his choice. Slinging his rifle over his shoulder, he began clearing debris from around the injured alien. The creature watched him with what seemed like a mixture of confusion and relief in its 4 luminescent eyes. "I must be out of my mind," James muttered as he worked. Max helped in his own way, digging at the looser rubble with his paws. The alien remained still, making occasional clicking sounds that James couldn't interpret. He noticed its armor was different from the usual scout class, more ornate, with markings he hadn't seen before. After 20 minutes of careful maneuvering, James managed to lift the beam enough for the alien to drag itself free. Instead of attempting to flee or fight, it remained seated, clutching its injured midsection. The blue fluid had stopped flowing, but James could tell the wound was serious. Using hand gestures, James indicated his intention to help. The alien responded by reaching slowly into a compartment in its armor. James tensed, but instead of a weapon, it withdrew a small device that projected a holographic image. The projection showed basic medical symbols, universal enough that James understood the alien was asking for help treating its wounds. "Base isn't going to like this," James said to Max, who wagged his tail encouragingly. He keyed his radio, speaking in a measured tone. "Command, this is Captain Miller. I've found a survivor. Requesting medical evacuation at my location. Situation is sensitive. Over." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Captain. Medical team en route. ETA 10 minutes. Details on survivor? Over." James hesitated before responding. "Will explain upon arrival. Approach with caution, but weapons down unless I say otherwise. Miller out." The alien watched this exchange with obvious interest. It pressed several buttons on its armor, and a series of lights went dark. James realized it was powering down its defensive systems. A clear show of trust. Time passed tensely as they waited. Max had settled down next to the alien, seemingly at ease. The creature had produced a small device that emitted a soft blue light, which appeared to be providing some relief to its injury. Occasionally, it would reach down to pat Max's head, the gesture becoming more natural each time. James heard the rescue team before he saw them. He stood up, moving to intercept them before they reached the site. Lieutenant Emma West led the 4-person medical team, all of whom stopped dead in their tracks when James briefed them. "Captain, this is insane," Emma whispered urgently. "That's the enemy. Protocol says." "Protocol isn't equipped for this situation," James interrupted. "Look at my dog. Max has never been wrong about a threat, and he's treating this one like a friend. Something's different here." Emma glanced at Max, who continued to sit contentedly beside the alien. Her expression shifted from disbelief to cautious curiosity. "The brass is going to have a field day with this," she said, but her tone had softened. As the medical team approached, the alien made a series of gentle clicking sounds that somehow seemed less threatening than the harsh battle cries they were used to hearing. Emma knelt beside it, medical scanner in hand, professional training overriding her initial fear. "These readings, they're like nothing we've seen before," she said, studying her device. "The biological structure is far more complex than our previous scans suggested. And look at these markings on the armor, they're not military designations." James watched as his seemingly crazy decision began to unfold into something much bigger than a simple rescue. The alien remained cooperative as Emma's team worked, and through a combination of gestures and simple drawings, they managed to establish basic communication. As they prepared to move the alien to a secure medical facility, James noticed something that made his heart race: a small symbol on the creature's armor that looked remarkably similar to the universal symbol for peace. He'd seen it before in recovered alien artifacts but had never understood its significance until now. Max barked once, tail wagging, as if to say, "I told you so." James smiled and patted his loyal companion's head, wondering if they had just stumbled upon something that could change the course of this seemingly endless war. But first, they had to convince everyone else that this unprecedented act of mercy was the right call. The secure medical facility beneath the ruins of downtown Seattle buzzed with tension. Word of James's unusual rescue had spread quickly, and now he stood before Colonel Thomas Baker, trying to explain his actions while Max sat faithfully at his feet. "Let me get this straight, Captain," Colonel Baker said, his weathered face creased with concern. "You not only disobeyed direct orders to eliminate all alien contacts, but you brought one into our main facility?" His voice echoed off the concrete walls of the underground bunker. "Sir, this one's different," James replied firmly. "The markings on its armor, its behavior, even Max could sense it. I believe it's trying to communicate something important." As if on cue, Dr. Emma West burst into the room, her usual composed demeanor replaced with barely contained excitement. "Colonel, Captain, you need to see this," she said, holding up a tablet displaying strange symbols and diagrams. They followed her to the medical bay, where the alien was being kept under guard. The creature sat upright on the examination table, its wounds partially healed thanks to a combination of its own technology and human medical care. Upon seeing James and Max, it made a series of musical clicking sounds that seemed almost welcoming. "We've been analyzing its communication attempts," Emma explained, pulling up more data on her tablet. "The symbols on its armor? They're not military ranks, they're academic credentials. We think this isn't a soldier at all. It's a scientist, possibly part of a research team." The alien reached for its holographic projector, and the guards tensed. Colonel Baker nodded, allowing it to proceed. The device hummed to life, displaying a series of images that left everyone in the room speechless. Scenes of a peaceful alien civilization, advanced cities that seemed to float among the clouds, and most surprisingly, creatures that looked remarkably similar to Earth's dogs. Through a combination of gestures and images, the alien began to tell its story. It showed another race of aliens, the ones currently attacking Earth, conquering its own world. The peaceful scientist class had been forced to serve as scouts and advance units for the invasion force, against their will. "They're slaves," James whispered, the realization hitting him hard. "They're victims, just like us." Max whined softly, pressing against his leg as if confirming his understanding. The projector then showed something that made Colonel Baker lean forward in shock: images of successful rebellions on other worlds, where the enslaved scientist class had helped indigenous populations overthrow their conquerors. The alien pointed to these images, then gestured to itself and the humans around it. "It's offering to help us," Emma said, her voice filled with awe. "It knows the invaders' weaknesses, their command structures, everything we've been trying to figure out for 3 years. Colonel Baker's stern expression began to soften. "If what you're saying is true, this changes everything. But how can we be sure this isn't an elaborate trap?" The alien seemed to anticipate this question. It reached into its armor and removed a small crystalline device, offering it to Emma. After some careful analysis, her eyes widened. "These are tactical codes, sir. Command protocols for their entire fleet. This is everything we need." "And it just handed it over," James added, watching as Max approached the alien again, receiving another gentle pat on the head. "Sir, in all my years of service, I've learned to trust 2 things, my dog's judgment and my gut. Both are telling me this is real." The alien stood up, its movements still careful due to its healing wounds. It approached Colonel Baker slowly, stopping at a respectful distance. Then it did something unexpected. It performed a perfect military salute, human style, clearly learned from observing their interactions. Colonel Baker studied the creature for a long moment, then returned the salute. "Get me secure communications with command," he ordered. "And somebody find me a translator. If we're going to start a rebellion, we need to be able to talk to our new ally properly." As the room burst into activity, James felt a profound sense of hope for the first time in years. He looked down at Max, who wagged his tail proudly. "Good boy," he said softly. "You saw what everyone else missed. You saw past the differences to find a friend." The alien made what sounded like a happy trilling noise, and James could have sworn it was smiling, in its own way. Now they just had to convince the rest of humanity that their greatest enemy might also be their greatest ally in the fight for freedom. The next 48 hours in the underground facility were a whirlwind of activity. The alien scientist, whom they had started calling Doc for simplicity's sake, worked tirelessly with the human military leadership to develop a plan of action. James, Emma, and Max remained constant fixtures in these strategic sessions, with Max having appointed himself as Doc's unofficial guardian. "The invasion fleet maintains control through these orbital command ships," Doc explained through a newly developed translation device. The holographic display showed massive vessels hovering above Earth's major cities. "But they are vulnerable. The enslaved scientist class maintains their systems, and many of us have been waiting for an opportunity to fight back." Colonel Baker studied the tactical display with intense focus. "How many of your people are up there, willing to help?" Doc's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture they had learned meant certainty. "Thousands. We have developed our own secret communication network over the years. When the signal is given, many will stand ready. James watched as Doc pulled up another hologram, this one showing the internal layout of the command ships. Max sat attentively beside the alien scientist, occasionally nudging its hand for another pat. The sight still amazed everyone who witnessed it. The key is synchronization, Doc continued. We must coordinate the ground assault with the internal sabotage. If we strike at random, the invasion force will simply execute all scientist-class crew members as a precaution. Emma, who had been analyzing the crystalline device containing the tactical codes, looked up from her work. These command protocols, they'll let us access their communication systems, right? We could use them to coordinate with your people. Precisely, Doc confirmed. But we must act quickly. The protocols change every lunar cycle, and we have only 3 Earth days remaining before the next change. The gravity of the situation settled over the room. 3 days to coordinate a global resistance movement, link up with alien allies, and launch an assault that would either free 2 species or doom them both. Colonel Baker turned to James. Captain Miller, I'm putting you in charge of ground operations. Your unique connection with our new ally makes you the ideal choice to coordinate between our forces and theirs. James nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility. What about the civilian population, sir? We'll need to warn them somehow, or the chaos could work against us. I have a solution for that, Doc interjected, manipulating the holographic controls. My people can temporarily disable the invasion force's ability to target civilian areas. It will give your people a chance to reach safety before the fighting begins. As they continued planning, a young lieutenant burst into the room. Sir! Our long-range sensors are picking up unusual activity in the invasion fleet. They're moving ships into new formations. Doc's posture suddenly changed, all 4 eyes widening in alarm. They're preparing for the purge, it said, voice trembling. It's a standard protocol when they suspect resistance. They'll begin executing scientist-class crew members within hours. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Colonel Baker immediately began issuing orders, his voice sharp and clear. Move up the timeline. All units on full alert. Captain Miller, get your team ready. Drive west. How soon can those command codes be implemented? Give me an hour, Emma replied, already rushing to her workstation. Maybe less. James felt Max press against his leg, the dog's posture alert but calm. Doc approached them, its normally smooth movements now urgent. Your dog, it said, gesturing to Max. He reminds me of the companions we had on my world before the invasion. They too could sense truth and loyalty beyond appearance. Perhaps that is why we were meant to find each other. Max has never been wrong about people, James replied, scratching his dog's ears. Or aliens, apparently. The facility's alert system suddenly blared to life, red lights casting strange shadows across the room. Colonel Baker's voice came over the intercom. All personnel to battle stations. Operation Freedom begins in 30 minutes. James looked at Doc, then at Max, then at the holographic display showing the massive invasion fleet above. In half an hour, they would attempt something unprecedented in human history. A coordinated rebellion alongside former enemies against a common oppressor. Ready, boy? He asked Max, who responded with a confident bark. Doc made a clicking sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. Your companion speaks for us all, the alien scientist said. We are ready to fight for our freedom, together. The underground command center thrummed with energy as the countdown to Operation Freedom reached its final minutes. James stood ready with his strike team, Max alert at his side, while Doc worked frantically with Emma at the communication console. The alien scientist's fingers flew across the holographic controls, sending encoded messages to its people aboard the invasion ships. Signal confirmed, Doc announced, all 4 eyes glowing with intensity. My people are in position. They await only the command sequence. Colonel Baker nodded grimly. Drive west, status of the command codes? Ready, sir, Emma replied, her fingers poised over her keyboard. Upload will begin on your mark. The massive screen at the front of the command center displayed multiple feeds, the invasion fleet above Seattle, ground forces positioned throughout the city, and similar scenes from major cities worldwide. Humanity was about to make its stand, not alone, but alongside unexpected allies. "Execute," Colonel Baker ordered. Emma's fingers danced across her console, launching the command codes Doc had provided. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the massive ships above began to show signs of internal chaos. Emergency lights flickered across their hulls, and their perfectly maintained formations began to waver. "First phase successful," Doc reported, its voice carrying both excitement and tension. "My people have begun their sabotage. Primary weapon systems are being disabled. Internal communications are in chaos." James checked his tactical display as reports flooded in from around the world. The scientist-class aliens were rising up on every ship, disabling systems and creating confusion among the invasion force. Now came the dangerous part. "Ground teams, move out," James commanded, leading his unit toward the surface. Max trotted beside him, with Doc following close behind. The alien scientist had insisted on joining the ground assault, arguing that its knowledge of invasion force technology would be crucial. As they emerged onto the streets of Seattle, the sky above them had become a battlefield. The massive command ships were turning against each other, as controls shifted between the invasion force and the rebelling scientists. Smaller craft zigzagged through the chaos, some piloted by loyal invasion forces, others by rebellion supporters. "Look!" someone shouted, pointing upward. A massive energy surge rippled through the nearest command ship, and suddenly all its external weapons powered down. Similar scenes were playing out across the fleet. "The containment fields are down," Doc announced triumphantly. "Now is the time for your forces to move in." James gave the signal, and human aircraft that had been hiding in underground bunkers took to the sky. They carried teams of soldiers ready to board the disabled ships, armed with both human weapons and tools provided by Doc's people to bypass invasion force security systems. Max suddenly barked a warning, and James spun around to see a group of invasion force ground troops approaching their position. Unlike the scientist class, these were the true enemy, the oppressors who had enslaved Doc's people and tried to conquer Earth. "Take cover!" James shouted as enemy fire lit up the street. His team responded instantly, taking defensive positions while returning fire. Doc pulled out a device that created an energy shield, protecting them from the worst of the assault. But it was Max who turned the tide of the battle. The dog had noticed something the others missed, a weakness in the enemy's formation. He darted forward, weaving through debris and weapons fire with incredible agility. The invasion force troops, confused by this unexpected attack, broke formation to avoid him. That was all the opening James's team needed. They pressed forward, using the confusion to their advantage. Doc's energy shield expanded to cover their advance, while Emma coordinated with other ground teams from her position in the command center. Above them, more and more command ships were going dark as the scientist class took control. The invasion force, facing rebellion from within and resistance from without, began to falter for the first time since they had arrived on Earth. James watched as Max returned to his side, tail wagging despite the chaos around them. Doc placed a hand on the dog's head, its gesture full of gratitude and affection. "Your companion has the heart of a warrior," it said, "and the wisdom to know when to trust rather than fear." The battle was far from over, but as James looked at the unlikely team around him, humans, a loyal dog, and an alien scientist fighting together for freedom, he knew they had already won something more important than any military victory. They had proven that trust and compassion could bridge any divide, even among the stars. The battle for Earth reached its crescendo as the sun began to rise over Seattle's scarred skyline. James, his uniform covered in dust and debris, watched from a makeshift observation post as the last pockets of invasion force resistance crumbled. Max sat beside him, tired but alert, while Doc worked on a portable communication device, coordinating with its people aboard the captured ships. "Final command ship secured in the Asian sector." Emma's voice crackled over the radio. "The scientist class has complete control of the fleet. Repeat, we have control of the fleet. A cheer went up from the assembled human forces. 3 years of occupation, of fighting what had seemed like a hopeless war, had ended in less than 24 hours thanks to their unexpected allies. Doc's translator conveyed its own joy as it shared more news. Reports are coming in from across your world. The invasion force commanders, seeing their defeat was inevitable, have begun surrendering. Those who refused. The alien scientist paused, its 4 eyes showing what James had learned to recognize as sadness. Those who refused were dealt with by my people. We will no longer be enslaved. Colonel Baker approached their position, his usually stern face breaking into a tired smile. Captain Miller, he said, I just got off a secure call with United Earth Command. They're calling this the greatest victory in human history, and it all started because your dog decided to make friends with an alien. Max's tail wagged at the mention of his role, and he pressed against Doc's leg affectionately. The alien scientist reached down to pet him, a gesture that had become natural over the past few days. Not just a victory, Doc corrected gently. A beginning. My people have much to atone for, even though we acted under duress. We would like to help rebuild what the invasion force destroyed, if you will allow it. James watched as more ships descended from orbit, these piloted by scientist-class crews who were already bringing medical supplies and reconstruction equipment. The scene was repeating itself in cities worldwide, former enemies working together to heal the wounds of war. There's something else you should know, Doc continued, its voice carrying a note of excitement that the translator couldn't quite convey. Before the invasion force enslaved us, my people were known across the galaxy for our achievements in science and healing. We had begun exploring ways to restore damaged ecosystems, to rebuild what wars and natural disasters had destroyed. With your permission, we would like to share this knowledge with humanity. Colonel Baker's eyes widened at the implications. You mean you could help us restore Earth to what it was before the invasion? Better, Doc replied. Together, we could create a world that combines the best of both our people's knowledge. And perhaps, it looked down at Max, who was now dozing peacefully, we could restart the companion animal program that was lost when our world was conquered. Your dogs remind us so much of the friends we lost. Emma, who had just arrived from the command center, joined the conversation. The preliminary reports from the captured ships are incredible, she said. Their database contains scientific knowledge that could advance our technology by centuries. Medical breakthroughs, clean energy, space travel, it's all there. James knelt beside Max, scratching behind his ears. All of this because you saw past appearances to find the truth, boy, he said softly. You knew Doc was different before any of us did. The sky was growing lighter, the dawn revealing both the destruction of battle and the first signs of reconstruction. Human and scientist-class medical teams worked side by side, treating the injured regardless of species. In the distance, captured invasion force weapons were being dismantled under the supervision of joint security teams. You know, Colonel Baker said thoughtfully, throughout human history, great changes often came from small acts of kindness. Who would have thought that the key to saving Earth would be a dog showing compassion to an injured alien? Doc made a sound that everyone had come to recognize as laughter. Perhaps it is not so strange. On both our worlds, it was our animal companions who taught us the most important lessons about trust, loyalty, and love. They see the truth that we sometimes miss in our prejudices and fears. As if understanding he was being discussed, Max stood up and barked once, tail wagging. Around them, the first full day of peace was beginning. There would be challenges ahead, rebuilding trust, healing wounds both physical and emotional, learning to work together, as equals rather than enemies. But as James watched his dog happily greeting both humans and aliens without distinction, he knew they would succeed. After all, if the dog could show them the way to peace, anything was possible.